Hello, so nice that you could join us. Welcome to this, another edition of the Coaching Hour podcast, proudly brought to you in partnership with Coaches Network South Africa. My name is Paul Rotherham, coming to you from my dining room at home in Benoni, and I'm joined by three lovely ladies once again. It always seems to be the case. Well, not always, but more often than not on these podcasts. I have Mary and Mareka with me, and then we have a female guest. We need more men in the coaching world. What's going on, guys? Remember to comment on this video if you are watching it live. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to receive your questions, hear your feedback. And of course, if you are in the coaching space and you'd like to get involved in some way, well, then reach out to us. We're always looking for new and exciting guests to host on this, the Coaching Hour. Mareka, how's it going? You're going to set up today's guest.
Yes, thank you so much, Paul. Thanks for the great introduction as always. And I agree, I guess we have to get some more men in the room. So let's make it our mission, Mary. We'll do that. Today we have a coach that's been supporting us and following us actually from the beginning. We've got Sharon Piel with us today. She's a certified life, business, and emotional intelligence coach. She has more than 10 years experience, and her passion lies with actually female entrepreneurs to help them unlock their potential and to thrive in their business and in their life. But today we're not going to focus on women entrepreneurs. We are actually going to talk about emotional intelligence in the workplace. But before we get to that, Sharon, please tell everybody that's watching us and listening at the moment, who is Sharon? How did you get into the coaching space and why you are passionate about women entrepreneurs?
Morning, Mareka and Paul and Mary. So my journey started probably 2013. Around about then, I went on a coaching workshop. It was actually a parenting workshop. At the time, I had two little ones. They're now teenagers. And it was more about you as a person than about parenting. So what happens with a lot of women is when they become moms, they lose their identity. You know, they become so focused on their children, on their babies, that they kind of lose themselves. And that was where I found myself. So I went on this coaching workshop, and it was really impactful because it wasn't just, as I said, about parenting. It was about you as a person, your own dreams and goals and aspirations in life, and where do you want to be and who do you want to be. After that, it was something that kind of stuck with me. And I realized that I wanted to help other women, do the same thing, is overcome those limiting beliefs and feeling stuck. So I enrolled in a coaching program for a year, a diploma course, and that was my start in coaching. Yeah.
Okay, great. So in terms of emotional intelligence, before we get into the topic, like I guess most people know what emotional intelligence are, but maybe we can actually just um, put some light onto the topic on what it actually refers to. And yeah, why is it important for people to be more emotionally intelligent, specifically in the workplace?
Okay, well, there's 5 components of emotional intelligence. The first and probably the most important is self-awareness. So that's our ability to be aware of our emotions, what our triggers are, how our behaviors and actions affect others. Secondly, self-regulation, which is our ability to control our emotions. So being able to master your emotions, regardless of the situation that you find yourself in. Thirdly, motivation, and this is intrinsic motivation, so self-motivation, that drive that you have to achieve your goals. And the fourth one is empathy, so our ability to share in the feelings of others, to see things from their perspective. And lastly, social skills, so our ability to interact with others, and to interact well with others.
Yes.
So all of those components actually make up emotional intelligence. And why it's so important, not just in the workplace, but in life, is because we are social beings. We are constantly interacting with others, every single day, from the petrol attendant to your family, to your friends, to your colleagues, in business. So we are always interacting with others. So how do we interact with others? How do our actions and behaviors, and specifically your emotions, affect you and affect others?
Yeah. I think the big thing is, when people hear the word emotional intelligence, they think it's all about feelings and emotions, more the empathy part of it, which is, like you said, just one aspect thereof. Um, if we can maybe look at the self-awareness, because it sounds simple, to have self-awareness, and probably most people will say, yes, but I have self-awareness, but then they don't. What does self-awareness actually refer to?
I think it's your ability to, in that moment, to realize what it is that you are feeling so that you can manage that emotion, especially strong emotions like anger and fear. If I can use anger as an example, anger is actually a secondary emotion. In other words, it's a reaction to another emotion, but we don't display that emotion. So it might be somebody disrespects us and we feel disrespected. So we react in anger, but what we're actually feeling is hurt.
Okay.
So if you can understand that, then you can control or manage how you respond. So, if, as I said, in this example, if somebody's just, says something to you that you find disrespectful, instead of reacting in anger in a sort of knee-jerk reaction, rather respond or pause and give yourself a few seconds to respond and say, well, that was really disrespectful, or that really hurt my feelings, and have a conversation rather than an argument. So that's basically how conflict starts, is that our needs are not met, or a want is not met, and that a lot of that is to do with our emotions, how other people make us feel, or how we perceive they make us feel.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting, the way that you've explained it. I love it when we have coaches here who have different ways of explaining things, but it all just makes sense, doesn't it? So what I'd like to know is, you mentioned triggers. Can you explain what is a trigger? Because trigger to some people doesn't mean what you're going to explain. It means other things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we all have different triggers or hot buttons, whatever you want to call it. Those are the things which go against our values, for example. So let's say we value honesty. Okay, honesty and integrity are part of our core values. Someone lies to you, okay, lies to your face. You immediately, what do you feel? You feel upset or disrespected, but we normally, again, coming back to the example of anger, we react with anger. So, but that is a hot button for us because that is something that's important to us, and values are those things which are important to us. So everybody has different triggers based on their values, their personalities, their past experiences. It's not going to be the same for everybody. But if you think about your own experience, there's something that if somebody does that, it flips your lid. And we all have that. So it's being aware of what that is, so that in future you can handle the situation better. So that instead of escalating and it becoming, rip-roaring argument, again, you communicate your feeling. I feel disrespected. I don't like it when people lie to me. Why did you lie to me? Have a conversation about it instead of, you know, getting angry and it becoming an argument. Because what happens when we become angry and we basically attack another person is they become defensive and then it escalates. And that's what we want to prevent. So that's what emotional intelligence is. It's about managing your emotions and your reaction and how your responses or reactions affect others, because they do. We all know that emotions are contagious. If you've ever been around a very negative person who's always complaining, moans about everything, how do you feel after you've been with that person? You feel down, you feel drained, you sometimes join in the complaining and you leave them feeling like very low. Whereas when you're around somebody who's happy and positive and has a positive mindset and outlook on life, you feel that you want to be in that person's company because they make you feel good. So that's really what it's all about, is being self-aware, not only of yourself, but also of others.
And I think communicating as well, Sharon, yeah, for a lot of my life, I was in spaces where people just didn't communicate. And I think I was guilty of that as well, even though I've been in the industry of communication my entire life, in perhaps relationships and business dealings. People don't communicate. And very often you can communicate, and long before something escalates or becomes an issue, you've resolved it, you've spoken about things. We seem to think that we live in an age, I know this is thrown around often, where social media, for instance, everybody is social and everybody's communicating. And very often that's not the case at all. We're all siloed. I find particularly since COVID, a lot of us have become siloed and kind of in our own worlds. And the fact that we work remotely perhaps even exacerbates that. But just communicate. Communication is so important. It really is.
I absolutely agree. It is important. Like you said, it's we often don't communicate things, and that is also a problem because our non-communication leaves it up to interpretation from the other person, or not being clear in our communication. And that's especially at work as well. We need to be clear about what the objective is, what are the goals of the team or the organization, and who plays what role, how is this project going to happen. So communication is key. And as you mentioned as well, in relationships too, communication is key. If you ask your partner to do something and they don't do it, our response is normally to feel disrespected, and we get angry. Why didn't you do it? I asked you to do it. But if they had communicated with you and said, I was really pressed for time, or something else came up, or I couldn't manage to get there today, I'll go tomorrow, then there's no argument. It's all about communication. You're absolutely right.
That's very, very interesting about the anger as well. When you said anger, now you related it to people. What happens if things don't work, like the computer switches off all the time, or the payment that someone promised didn't arrive, and then anger, then I'm not talking about myself, but I know people that go into anger bursts, and then they throw the TV or they throw this phone, and what can you advise about that kind of behavior? Where does that come from? Because now it's not a person anymore, it's an object.
Yeah, I think that is also largely, a person who displays low emotional intelligence. Because if they realized, okay, I'm getting angry at this, but if they, instead of getting angry and throwing the phone or the computer or whatever, what can I do about this problem? And rather problem solve and come up with a solution, rather than, react in a negative way, which is only going to be damaging. So I think that's where mindfulness comes in as well, is practicing mindfulness and doing breathing exercises to keep yourself calm. And mindfulness has been shown to, and meditation has been shown to change your state from one of, anger in this example to one of being calm and peaceful. So when things like that happen, I would suggest, just take a few deep breaths and ask yourself, is this really the end of the world? Does it warrant me now damaging the very thing I'm trying to get work? No, it doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? So you go through a process of understanding what the problem is, how can I solve it and resolve it, rather than reacting in a reactive way, in a negative way.
It is an awareness. But, however, some people don't have that space to stop. It's a spontaneous, involuntary action.
Yeah, again, you can work on that by practicing self-awareness. It's not something that self-awareness is a skill like anything else. It can be learned, but you've got to practice it, and it doesn't happen overnight. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So once you start practicing self-awareness, you'll find you can catch yourself, in that moment. Oh, let me just stop what I'm doing now and just breathe, or let me go and have a glass of water and just shift your state. It's sometimes just little things like taking a moment to breathe, or going for a walk outside, or stepping outside of the office when you feel triggered. The little things that can change your state from being reactive to being responsive. And I think it's really important to do that, because as Paul mentioned before, it can damage relationships if we are constantly reacting and reactive and criticizing and being angry with somebody. What does that do? It breaks down the relationship. And in the work environment, it's all about building relationships. You've got to work together as a team. You're working with customers, clients, suppliers. It's all about building relationships. So it's not exclusively to, in a work environment or in your personal life, it's in both.
I've often found, Mary, that, and I seldom have it anymore, but in my younger years, I used to become very frustrated. And that frustration almost led to anger, and that anger would lead to me punching things or breaking things or throwing things. And it never got to the point where I would have considered myself abusive in any way. And it was always towards an inanimate object. It was never aimed at people. But what if I look back on my life now in the younger Paul, what I realize is a lot of those moments of frustration where I'll never forget the one day I'd had a particularly stressful day, and I literally I took the keyboard from my computer. In those days, it was still a wired keyboard. And I literally bent it in half over the edge of my office desk. All the buttons shot out and went everywhere. If nothing else, I learned what goes into making a keyboard. And it's quite interesting how many layers there are underneath those keys. But what I've realized now, call it wisdom or maturity or age, I realized that it had nothing to do with that keyboard or that computer. What had happened on that particular day is it was a series of events and things that had happened from early in the morning. In those days, I was still working on the radio. I was getting up at 3:30 in the morning. So they were very often long days. And it was just this progression of stress that was building up. And because I didn't have the skills to cope with each event as it happened, what would happen by the end of the afternoon or early evening is all of the day's stresses had now piled up and I hadn't processed anything. So I think the secret there and what I learned and what I try and apply now is through the day, and nothing's changed, even though this is now an older Paul, nothing has changed. I'm still finding frustrations in life and stress as we all do. But I find if you, as Sharon just said, if you take a moment and deal with what has happened at that time, and admittedly, you can't always go and have a 5-minute smoke break. I don't smoke, but I know people who do, or a 5-minute cup of tea, or go for a walk in the garden. You're not always in a space where you can do that. But mentally, generally, you can process things as they happen. And even if it's just a short breathing exercise, I find that processing those things allows you to just build up this almost immunity to the day's events. So when you get to the end of the day, you can look back and think, sure, today was actually a stressful day, but it hasn't broken me because the culmination effect isn't there. I've taken things as they've happened and I've processed them. So that's just in my experience, something that I've found really helpful. And you don't always get it right. I still have days where I get to the end of the day and I'm just completely frazzled, but I'm finding I can honestly say that I don't punch things and break things, and I'm nowhere near as violent, if you will, in those outbursts. And I use violent cautiously. I don't want you to think I'm a violent guy because I'm really not. But processing those things when they happen is very helpful.
Paul, you touched on two very important things there: stress and being tired. When we're stressed and when we're tired, that's usually when we are triggered, because we're feeling stressed, because we're feeling tired. So again, that's where self-awareness comes in, realizing that, okay, I am feeling stressed. I have had a stressful day, but being aware of it before you get home so that you don't take it out on your family and your loved ones. And again, even with tiredness as well, we kind of tend to be a little bit less patient when we're tired, and we can be sometimes short-tempered or snap at people because we're feeling stressed and tired. So that's why, as I said right at the beginning, self-awareness really is the key. It's so important to be self-aware, because the more you do it, the more you become self-aware, the easier it becomes the next time. And you've actually, just proven that by you were aware of your triggers and the state that you were in, the frustration that you felt, and that you used to take it out on inanimate objects, but you've slowly, with realization that, okay, that's not really helpful behavior, you now still get, obviously we all get frustrated and stressed and tired in life. Life is hectic, but not to react in a way that's detrimental to ourselves or to others. To actually deal with the problem then and there, or at least be aware of it and try and find a coping mechanism, a healthy coping mechanism for those feelings, for that, an outlet for that stress and frustration. And exercise is one of them as well, because exercise, releases endorphins. That's a really easy, simple way of getting rid of the day's frustrations is hitting the gym after work. Or even if you can't go to gym, just a simple something that's going to just calm you. Just take 5-10 minutes to yourself to do something that relaxes you and changes your state.
Interesting that you mentioned that, because through most of my radio career, my running took a back seat. So I was always a keen runner at school and when I was in the military. And then when I got into the career of doing what I did for many years, time was just always so precious that I was either out of time or I was too tired. So my running literally just ground to a halt. And I think you've touched on something there that's so important is exercise and the benefits of exercise, because now, having left that world largely, I now do have the time to run, sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon, but I have the time and the energy to do it, and the difference that makes. So I think my personal experience, advice from that would be that if you do find yourself stressed, as many of us do, and you're just, your fuse is burning short and you're frustrated, even just going for a walk around the block, just getting some fresh air, the benefits of exercise really cannot be overstated. It just changes us. And as humans, we were designed to move and designed to exercise. And very few people do. We live in a time now where most of our day is spent in front of a computer screen for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think self-care is important. So, also getting enough sleep, making sure you get at least 7 hours sleep a night, drinking water, eating healthy, nutritious meals. All of those things affect our moods as well. So it's important to take care of ourselves and do those things. Exercise, cut down on caffeine and alcohol, drink lots of water, get enough sleep, because it does change how we interact with others. Because you know what it's like if you get up in the morning and you're feeling tired and groggy and you start the day off like that, it kind of snowballs, and by the end of the day, you've had it, you're short-tempered, you're, like you mentioned, you're frazzled and frustrated and stressed, and it does affect how we interact with others. So it's important to look after ourselves, and fill your own cup first.
Yeah. So, that coffee in the morning isn't really the energizer. And people think, oh, let's go and have some coffee. I need a boost. Let's go and have some coffee. But that's totally the opposite. It dehydrates you. It doesn't energize.
And coffee can affect people differently. Some people, may get an energy burst from it, but for other people, it can actually make them anxious, and they don't actually realize it, that caffeine can actually make you anxious. So, again, then you kind of like wonder why you're behaving a particular way. It's because you've had like 6 cups of coffee and it's only like 10 o'clock. So that's why awareness again is key, being self-aware, realizing, okay, I need to drink more water and cut back on the coffee, because it's better for me, it's healthier for my body and for my mind.
So Sharon, I think, especially in the times that we find ourselves in, because we actually touch on a few things that could be a whole conversation on its own, because I think you can't be emotionally intelligent if you don't manage your stress, because you have to manage your stress. And what Paul mentioned is actually the perfect definition of resilience, for example. The more self-aware he became, the more he manages his emotions, the more resilient he becomes to those challenges. But if you just to recap and also to maybe wrap up our session for today, there's 5 elements of emotional intelligence that you've mentioned. Perhaps if you can give one tip, perhaps on each one of them, if someone realizes that I need to become more emotionally intelligent, I want to work on myself. If we can just quickly recap those 5 aspects and what can help someone to become more, like I said, EQ smart.
Okay. So self-awareness, I think, is You know, start becoming aware of your emotions and label it. Label your emotions. What am I feeling? Ask yourself, what am I feeling? Because often we know that we're getting, out of our normal state, but we don't actually name the emotion. So what is it? Are you stressed? Are you tired? Are you overwhelmed? Because all of those things are very similar. But if we actually label it, then we are better able to deal with it, because then you can't change what you're not aware of. So particularly when it comes to your behaviors, and the same with emotions, you can't change it if you don't know what it is that you need to change. So understand what it is that you are feeling, give it a name. Am I feeling angry? Am I feeling disrespected? Am I feeling whatever the case is? So being aware of that, just ask yourself that question in the moment. What am I feeling right now? And check in with yourself throughout the day, because I think we also get so busy that we actually don't even notice what we're feeling. We just keep going and going and going. We've got work to do. We've got work, we're busy, busy, busy. And you don't actually check in with yourself. How am I actually feeling? What do I need right now in this moment? So I think that's the first thing. And then in terms of self-regulation, the two go hand in hand, self-awareness and self-regulation, being able to regulate your emotions. So finding healthy coping mechanisms when you are feeling stressed and overwhelmed and tired. Do something to get out of that state into a more calm, relaxed state.
Rather breathe before shouting at someone.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Take the pause, the 10-second pause.
Mm.
Motivation, we talk about intrinsic motivation. So that's our internal drive to reach goals. And, again, that's also important in terms of our self-worth. It's important in life to have goals and to be working towards something, whether it's a goal, of saving up for a car, or whether it's a more personal goal like being less angry, being a less angry person, being a more patient person. If you want to work on those things, then self-awareness again is key. And why do you want that? Because it's better for your relationships, because you can see that your behavior is negatively affecting the people around you and your relationships. Empathy is very important, I think, as well, especially in conflict situations, is trying to see things from the other person's perspective. Why is that person reacting the way they are? Or what is it that they are feeling? Or, if somebody comes to you with a problem, is to put yourself in their shoes. How must they feel? And then you are able to better respond and to help them overcome that feeling. And sometimes all you need to do is actually just listen. Because a lot of the time people just want to be heard. They just want somebody to acknowledge them and listen to them. So I think that's also very important. And then lastly, social skills, our ability to interact well with others. Well, as we said, they're all equally important, but being aware of your social interactions, when you walk into a room, how do you what sort of energy do you bring to the room? Are you negative? Are you pessimistic? Are you always complaining? Or are you, positive and want to work with other people as a team and share ideas and listen to others? I think listening is so important. It's a really underrated skill. And I think active listening is also part of emotional intelligence, being able to listen to others from the point of view of listening to understand rather than listening to respond. And I think if you can practice those things, your relationships at work and at home, wherever you are, will be so much better.
I think the good news is it's not that you have emotional intelligence or you don't. It's something that you can actually develop. It's a skill. If you put your mind to it, you make it maybe as a goal, and you practice, these steps that you've just given, it's something that you can actually grow and develop. So thank you so much. It's very insightful.
My pleasure.
Lovely. Sharon, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. Remember that if you have any questions or comments, we would love to see them and read them and hear from you in the comments section. That's where you can pop those. And of course, we'll look forward to your company in the next one as we line up another guest, I'm sure, who will be joining us next week for this, the Coaching Hour podcast. Ladies, thank you so much. And thank you for watching and listening. We'll catch you on the next one.